Hey guys, Spud here, and today we're taking a look at how to employ the AGM-65 Foxtrot from the A-18C Hornet. I have seen a lot of folks have a lot of trouble with this weapon, so I figured it was definitely worth a revisit here in 2026. The AGM-65F was originally developed in the late 1980s, specifically for the US Navy as an anti-shipping weapon for employment aboard the A-7E Corsair II, P-3C Orion, and our F-A-18 Hornet. The weapon combines the large 300-pound penetrating warhead and rocket motor of the AGM-65E and the IR seeker head of the AGM-65D, tuned specifically for acquiring and tracking large moving ships and ensuring the weapon hits the target near the waterline. This is where I think most of the frustration of DCS World pilots comes into play. It really wasn't designed for T-72 plinking in the desert. So if your target is armored formations in the hot sand, I recommend you have your ordies load up some AGM-65E Laser Guided Mavericks or GBU-12s instead. The AGM-65 Foxtrot has three main ways you can employ it against maritime targets: as a standalone sensor, coupled to your sea search radar, and coupled to your targeting pod. In this tutorial, we're going to be going over all three methods. Alright guys, welcome back to the office of the F-A-18C Hornet for our tutorial and demonstration on how to employ the AGM-65 Foxtrot. For the first part of our tutorial here, we're going to talk about how to employ the AGM-65F by itself without coupling it to another sensor, and just using the AGM-65F's integrated IR sensor to search, acquire, and then prosecute a target. Now, our targets for today are a couple of Grisha patrol craft that are out here in the Strait of Hormuz to harass some commercial shipping, and this is really the perfect type of target for the AGM-65F. Like I said in the intro, if you're going tank plinking, go ahead and bring the AGM-65E Laser Guided Maverick. So, heading back to the cockpit here, let's first set things up for our AGM-65s for the engagement ahead. We'll go ahead and go to air-to-ground master mode, and of course this will auto-populate our stores page on the left DDI. We can see that we have AGM-65Fs on our left outboard and right outboard stations, and we'll select them by selecting MAV-F along the top row of OSBs. To open up the MAV-F seeker head video feed, all we need to do is just select the same button once again, and then we're greeted by the video feed from the IR seeker head. Now, to set things up before our engagement, I like to go ahead and turn on the ship mode, which will tune the seeker head even further for tracking and engaging enemy maritime targets. This will ensure that the weapon tries to hit the target as close to the waterline as possible, which is a good thing for pretty obvious reasons here. We can also pre-zoom the FOV of the seeker head itself. Now, to control the seeker head of our Maverick, we need to go sensor control switch left in order to slave our HOTAS controls to the Maverick itself. Next, up here on the HUD, we can see we have a little inverse triangle here. The very tip of the bottom part of the triangle is where the seeker head of our Maverick is currently looking. Now, the big gotcha when it comes to using the AGM-65F is in order to slew the seeker head, we must simultaneously press and hold TDC depress while also moving our TDC around to slew the seeker head. We can see as I move it here now, we can also see that the triangle on the HUD moves in relation to where the seeker head is currently pointing. Now, when we release TDC depress, the Maverick will attempt a lock-on. And if it fails its attempted lock-on, we can see the crosshairs expand out to the sides of the display. Now, in order to bring the crosshairs back, all we need to do is press and hold TDC to press and try to slew the Maverick around again, and then when we release TDC to press, the weapon will attempt another lock-on, and we can see it failed there. Now, we can also re-cage the secret head back to the bore sight line by pressing our cage uncage button, and we can see up here on the HUD it slewed right back to bore sight. Now, when it comes to engaging targets just using the secret head of our Maverick, I recommend leaving the weapon caged and then flying the nose of your aircraft onto the target, then making a fine adjustment using your TDC and commanding the weapon to attempt a lock-on. So let's go ahead and start to attack our Grisha patrol vessels that we have for targets here. We'll start to go ahead and come on around here. And we've got a couple of RWR nails from the radars on board those Grishas, so that should kind of help us start to get our nose onto those targets. And you'll see in the second and third parts of the video here why it's super beneficial to actually couple the secret head of your Maverick to additional sensors in order to help find things like ships. We're starting to look here, and looks like I see them down there. So go ahead and pull the throttle back to idle. We'll get the triangle of the secret head of the Maverick as close to the target as possible. We can see the crosshairs are pretty close to that Grisha there. They're a bit closer to me than I would have liked. I would have liked to have a bit of a longer run-in, but we're going to pull the power to idle. We're going to press and hold TDC to press and slew with the TDC right onto our target. And when we see the crosshairs snap onto the target here, we know that it is locked. And looking up on our HUD here, Mav F no longer has an X through it, which means that the weapon is locked onto the target and we're ready to press the pickle button and fire the weapon off of the rail. So we'll unpause here, we'll fire the weapon, and of course, because it is an IR secret head AGM-65, it is a fire and forget weapon, so we can go ahead and start to go defensive and ensure that we don't get hit by any of the air defenses on board those Grishas. Taking a look at the weapon itself, we can see it is definitely tracking the enemy ship that we wish to engage. Make sure that our Hornet doesn't crash. And the 300-pound warhead aboard the AGM-65F will definitely do some big damage against our warship here. So definitely a successful hit. And we'll come back around for a re-engagement. Should be a little bit easier to visually find our targets this time, now that we've got a nice big fire started aboard one of those Grishas. So we'll go ahead and make about a 180-degree turn off to our right-hand side here, build up a little bit of extra separation. And we can see here we attack the target from such a top-down perspective there that our weapon didn't really have time to try and go for the waterline of the ship. As we're flying around for the re-attack, we'll set up our next Maverick. We already have the ship function pre-selected for the next Maverick. We can use the OSB button to zoom in and out the FOV, or we can also use the Raid FLIR FOV button as well. You can see we've got the Grisha is still steaming along, even though she is mortally wounded, and we'll try to go after her wingman in order to damage both ships, and we can see they're sailing out towards this tanker right here, so we definitely want to try and protect that tanker. Pull the power back to idle as we start to come down onto the target. We're going to fly the secret head of our Maverick right onto the target, or as close as we can, using the triangle in the HUD. TDC to press, slew the weapon, get as close to the Grisha as we can, release TDC to press, and we've got a lock and rifle. Again, it's a fire and forget weapon, so we can go ahead and pull off the target and go defensive, because of course these ships down here are definitely not very happy with us shooting at them. Taking a look at the view of our weapon. Make sure our Hornet doesn't crash. And shack. And we can see in this engagement here, because we had a little bit of a better angle coming down on the ship from more of a side view, we can see that the AGM-65F biased itself down towards the waterline of the ship. So now that we have both Grecias mortally wounded here, let's go ahead and reset the mission file and talk about using our AGM-65F in conjunction with the Sea Search Radar here in the FA-18. It'll definitely make finding those ships a heck of a lot easier. Okay guys, we've gone ahead and reset the MIS file here, and we've set up a much lower visibility type of situation, which is going to be perfect for coupling the secret head of our AGM-65F to the Sea Search Radar of our FA-18C Hornet. So right off the bat here, we of course have to set everything up. We'll go to air-to-ground master mode once again. We'll select our AGM-65F so we can see they are on the same stations on our wing form here. We'll bring up the video feed from the seeker head of our AGM-65Fs. We'll set ship mode, and we'll pre-zoom in the FOV of our seeker head of our weapon. Next, coming over to our radar display, we'll bring the radar of our FA-18 over to Sea Search mode, and we can see we're already starting to pick up those two Grecias as they're sailing through the Straits of Hormuz. Now, we need to go ahead and set a track on top of those Grecias, so we'll go sensor control switch right in order to slave our HOTAS controls over to our Sea Search Radar, and we'll bring our radar cursor over on top of these contacts using the TDC. Now, there's a little bit of a gotcha here. If we go TDC depress on top of our tracks here, we can see it's set up a little bit of a cross symbol near the two Grecias that we can see on our radar display. Now, this can be a bit of a gotcha because this is a stationary SPI, or sensor point of interest, which will slave all other sensors in our FA-18 onto a stationary point in the ocean, sort of somewhere near where those Grecias are sailing. And we need to ensure that we have an actual moving track of those individual targets, not just a stationary SPI somewhere in the neighborhood of the ships we're looking to attack. So we'll go ahead and hit the undesignate button on our stick in order to get rid of that SPI. And in order to initiate a track of one of these Grecias, we'll go ahead and hit sensor control switch right once again. This will initiate an actual track of one of the ships that are down there, just like you would do if you were, say, in an air-to-air engagement against a MiG. Now we can see here that the ship is sailing at 34 knots at a heading of 220 degrees, and we can note that and hand that off to any other assets in the area who also might be looking to attack these targets. Next, we can go ahead and slave our AGM-65 seeker head to this track. In order to do that, all we need to do is go sensor control switch left to slave our HOTAS controls over to our AGM-65 video feed. Now let's go ahead and adjust the contrast a little bit, make these guys easier to see. And we'll see here in a bit that the track is not absolutely perfect. We can see it kind of drifts off there, and then the radar will correct it every so often here. And if for whatever reason we want to pull the seeker head of the Maverick off of our tracked ships, all we have to do is hit the cage uncage button to bring it back up to bore sight. And then if we want to slave it back to our currently tracked ships, just hit the cage uncage button once again, and boom, we're right back there. Now, as we get closer to the target, the AGM-65F's seeker head will attempt to automatically lock on to the tracked targets. If it fails to do so, you can always fall back to doing a manual kind of adjusting of the seeker head of the Maverick using the TDC and then initiating a track by releasing the TDC depress button. But we can see here it worked as advertised, and we already have a automatic lock on the Grisha down there. So all we need to do now is kick the autopilot off and the auto throttle off, and start to come around towards our target here. And one advantage that we have here is we don't have to point our nose down at the target, so we can remain up at altitude even as we're engaging with our AGM-65Fs here. We're getting to within max range. There we go, we're in range. We'll go ahead and ripple off the Maverick. There's rifle. And we'll start to come around and flow defensive, so that way we don't get within any of the defensive weapons on board those Grishas. And we'll go ahead and take a look at the feed from the Maverick itself. And it looks like they got a little bit closer to that tanker we were trying to protect, but that's okay. Make sure we don't crash our Hornet here. And shack. Boom. That's one very unhappy Grisha crew. Alright. And that's all there is to it, guys. Keep in mind that you just have to be a little bit patient when it comes to that automatic lock-on from the Maverick being slewed specifically to a specific target via your sea search radar. But if that fails, like it sometimes does, all you got to do is just manually adjust a little bit using the TDC, just like we did in the first part of this video. So let's go ahead and jump over to the third part of our video today, slaving the seeker head of our AGM-65F to our targeting pod. Okay guys, we've gone ahead and reset the MIS file once again, and we've changed up the weather to give you guys a different look. And for part 3 of our tutorial here, we're going to be coupling the seeker head of our AGM-65 Foxtrot to our targeting pod. The difference in the situation this time is we have a known location of a stationary ship near an anchorage, and that's going to lend itself really well to using the targeting pod to find and then acquire the ship, and then hand that location off to our AGM-65F's seeker head. So, of course, just like before, we're going to set everything up, air-to-ground master mode. We're going to go ahead and select our AGM-65Fs, bring up the video feed. We'll go to ship mode, zoom in the FOV, and then over on our right DDI, instead of using the radar display, we're going to go ahead and bring up our FLIR page. We will switch our targeting pod over to FLIR mode, and then I'm going to go ahead and adjust the contrast a little bit. We'll select our waypoint that we know is in the known location of our target. We'll designate it as a target point, and that will create a SPI that will snap our targeting pod right to our target area. Sensor control, switch right to slave our HOTAS controls to our targeting pod. We'll zoom everything in. And one thing here that's a little bit interesting is now that we have video feed from both our targeting pod as well as our AGM-65F, the RAID FOV select button on the throttle of our HOTAS is going to be slaved always to the AGM-65's FOV instead of the targeting pod, even though we have the little diamond up in the right-hand corner here that means that our HOTAS is slaved to our targeting pod feed. That's just a little gotcha that can be a little bit confusing and something that's good to note here. So, in order to zoom in our targeting pod all the way, we'll have to hit the wide narrow FOV select button on the top left OSB. And we can see here that this old rusted out LST is just outside of a little anchorage, and he's nice and stationary, no big deal there. Coming over to our AGM-65 feed, we can see that the weapon was automatically slaved right to the SPI that was set when we designated our waypoint as a target, and then of course we've got the targeting pod right on top of it. If we wanted to say attack something else, we could move our TDC over to another location, hit TDC depress, and that will snap the field of view of our AGM-65 right to that new location. So let's go ahead and move her on back over to the little rusted out LST that's over here. We'll go ahead and hit TDC depress. That's going to slave the AGM-65 right to it. We'll adjust the contrast a little bit. Looks like she's having a hard time seeing it at the moment. And we'll wait till a little bit closer. Hopefully we get an automatic lock on, but based off of the really bad contrast here, it looks like we may have a bit of a hard time locking the ship, probably because she's stationary, so she's not all that hot at the moment. So we'll go ahead and kick the autopilot and the auto throttles off. And to command the missile to attempt an automatic lock-on, we'll go sensor control switch left to slave our HOTAS controls to our Maverick video feed, and hopefully there's enough contrast, but yep, looks like we are good to go to ripple that weapon off. Now we'll go ahead and dip the nose just a little bit because it's a little more fun than just flying straight and level while delivering weapons. Alright, that's looking good. Definitely got a lot more contrast now that we're a lot closer. We're in range. We'll go ahead and ripple off the Maverick. Call rifle on the radio. And of course, because we have a targeting pod this time, it's going to be a lot easier to get real-time BDA on our target. So we'll go ahead and pull off, so that way we don't get engaged by any defenses that are down there. We'll go ahead and roll out, and we'll wait for the impact on the LST. Looking at the feed from the Maverick here as she's flying along, definitely tracking the right target. And taking a look at our targeting pod. Boom. Right there, right into the waterline of that rusted out old LST. Absolutely perfect. And that 300-pound penetrating warhead is definitely going to do a lot of damage to that old ship. So guys, I know that the AGM-65F is definitely the trickiest weapon to use here with the A-18C Hornet, and I hope this tutorial helps you guys out when it comes to employing this weapon. And again, I know I've said it a couple times already, but a lot of the frustration comes from trying to use the Maverick F as a tank plinking weapon instead of an anti-shipping weapon. So if you're going after T-72s in the desert, I definitely recommend you go ahead and choose a AGM-65E Laser Guided Maverick or GBU-12 or something of that nature. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please leave a like and a subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one. Fly safe out there and enjoy this beautiful game.